Hi peeps, and as promised, it's Tess back to ramble on about economics, fiscal policy, but it's not just about economics and fiscal policy. This is really a deeper thing. This is really about what and who we are as a species, as a race of animals. I'm going to start off with I suppose a mind fat, an imaginary scenario. Just imagine a way back when you were living in a hunter-gathering sort of group. You were a little clan of maybe 25 or 35 people. Maybe sort of like 10 families. Or 7 families or 8 families. You're living on the plains of Africa, and you're hunter-gatherers. You live off the piece of land within a mile or 2 or 3 of your base encampment. And you're living off the land basically. You eat what's there, and then when it starts to get thin and it gets more difficult to provide enough food for the tribe, for the village, what do you do? I mean, there's nobody around for hundreds of miles. There's no other villages or clans, or you can't phone somebody and call in a bus or a truck with food. What do you do? Well, you pack up everything that you brought with you and made your village out of, which you didn't make out of the surrounding environment. Things that you move from camp to camp. You pack that all up, and then you move, another 20 or 30 or 50 miles, and then you make another camp. And then you live off the land around about you where the place you've just been regenerates. You've got I can't remember what they call it when an animal's got you've got a rein. You've got a piece of terrain that you rein over. You move around in, and you basically know from season to season where to be at the right time for fruit and plants, and for animals to be. So you've got a circuit around a huge area of a few hundred miles or a few hundred kilometres or a few thousand kilometres. Who knows? Depending. I don't really know because I've not lived in it, but I can envision it. You move around because when you've thinned out the game and you've ate all the plants that you can eat, and without destroying them, and you've collected all the berries and nuts, you're basically going to starve if you stay there, and you're going to destroy the environment to the point where it won't recover. So you up stakes and you move to a new fresh area that you can live in, and that was the economy back then, because it was an economy, economics. It wasn't just financial economics, and we don't even live in a financial economics. We actually live on farms today. We live by farms, farming. It's all classed as money now. How much can you get for a pig, and how much can you get for a cow? But I mean, back then they didn't have a price on it. I mean, you went out, you hunted, you brought meat back, you fed every day, and you did your thing. So that was economics back then. The economics were that if you stayed in a place too long, you suffered. People went without food. You have to ration people if you stayed too long. So when things got to the place where we're not all getting what we need, you upped stakes and you moved. Now that changed when we learned to farm. That changed, I must say, when we learned to stay in one place and produce a crop over a season, and farm animals, and be able to provide ourselves with meat without going hunting it. But we actually grew the meat. Then we had to have an economy because, well, it wasn't so much that your son went out and hunted with hunters, then came back and you got a share of the food. There might only be one guy in the village who knows how to really grow pigs. You might have your own little pig, but it's not enough. But he's got 10 or 15 pigs, and he can slaughter one every couple of weeks and provide food. So, but since he's putting all that work in and you're just sitting in your ass, I don't know, painting or weaving baskets and hoping to get enough, meat for bag. But everybody can weave baskets, you know what I mean? Even the farmer, when he's not feeding his pigs and looking after them, he can fucking weave his own basket. So this is where economy starts coming into. So you have to, I think this is where maybe we grew as a species. You had to provide something that he couldn't. So you provided him with something he couldn't. He was growing his pigs and still weaving his baskets. So what you do? Well, maybe you became the specialist butcher. He knew how to grow the pigs, but maybe he wasn't very good at cutting them up. He didn't know how to cut them up without spoiling some of the meat sometimes. So somebody became specialist at making really good knives for intricate work. Make sure you didn't bust the this or that. I don't know. I'm just imagining, but and so you became a specialist, or somebody became a specialist. They learned how to make, instead of weaving baskets, somebody learned that this lump of mud is smooth and softer than mud, but if you bake it in a fire it becomes hard. And so somebody became a potter, so now pottery starts up, and so then you swap your pottery for meat, and somebody becomes a farmer and grows grain. You swap pots for the grain, or you make a pot, but you don't sell that pot to or trade to other people. What you do is say, well, bring your grain to me and I'll cook the grain in the pot, and then you get bread out of it. You know what I mean? And then I'll make all the bread. You give me 2 or 3 breads, and then the rest of them you can trade with other people who are doing jewellery or make houses and re-thatch your roof. All that. That's where economy started, as we began to live in small groups, small villages, towns. And then since you weren't moving around so much and you were trying to, live sustainably on how much meat and grain you produce and how much bread you produce, how much pot you produce, then you met other tribes who were maybe just 100 miles away, and they did something different from you. They had something you specifically wanted. Somebody was a brewer, made beer, and you hadn't heard of beer yet, and they wouldn't tell you to make the beer, but they would give you beer instead of meat. So then these things started up. You trade between villages. So that's where economy started. But it was all a reciprocal thing. We decide how much it was worth, and then you haggled about it. And when you get a flood and the village destroyed, well, people died. Whole villages were probably wiped out. And then you have huge abundance where people say, well, we grow a lot better corn, but this year we've got a bumper corn, so we don't need your corn. We just need to know how to make bread. Well, you say, well, bring your corn here and we'll make your bread for you. So then you had another trade with them. So that's how the economy grew and changed, I think. I'm just imagining, I'm just looking at it from how I think we could possibly have got where we are now from where we were, right? So that was the economy back then, from the hunter-gatherer, moving around, not trading any, to small villages, but still very distant apart, but still willing to trade, you know what I mean? And then we come, like, just skip a couple of thousand years, right? And we get up to today, where we've got corporations who, instead of caring about, the people that they are aligned with. I mean, let's face it, American corporations are American corporations. But do they really care about the American people? Do they care about their village? It's a much larger village now. It's a fucking huge, gigantic nation. The United States of America. They're huge fucking nations. But does Coca-Cola care about the American people? Well, it did when the only people buying Coca-Cola were Americans. But now that they can sell Coca-Cola across the world, do they really care about America? They could have just made Coca-Cola in America. They could just have said that if people around the world want to buy Coca-Cola, well, instead of us selling it cheaper in India than what we sell it in America, because let's face it, a bottle of Coke in India is cheaper than a bottle of Coke in America. They could have made every bottle of Coke in America and charged them 3 times as much to drink it in India. Do you think the Indians would have paid 3 times as much for Coca-Cola? Well, if Coca-Cola is so fucking good that they needed to have it, they would have fucking paid that money. The problem with what we've got with our economy and our financial systems now is they don't need to make the Coca-Cola in America. And they don't want to make Coca-Cola in America. because they know they can set a Coca-Cola factory up in India. It's cheaper to build the factory. It's cheaper to employ people in India. Therefore, cocoa is made cheaper, so they can sell it cheaper in fucking India. And the Indians get cheap Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola makes just as much profit off of selling it cheap in India because it's made so much cheaper than it does making it quite expensively in America and selling it really expensively in America. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that. Economics. And this is the problem we have today. You don't need to make things in your village anymore. You can get another village to make it for you. You know, and sell it cheap in that village than you sell in your own village. And since you don't have to employ people in your village to make Coca-Cola anymore, because you can get it made in India and then ship it back, and it's cheaper to make it in India and ship it back to America and sell it in America than it is to make it in America and sell it in America. Maybe not Coca-Cola, but other items, you know. And this is what we see being done with these corporations. Do you think these corporations care? These corporations who are national corporations, they are American corporations. Do you think they actually care about American people? No, they don't. They care about what? They care about profit. Why do they care about profit? Because it's written into their, I don't know what you call it, their constitution, their corporate constitution, or whatever it is. You know, the law says the only thing a corporation needs to care about is making profit for the people who own the business. You know what I mean? For the shareholders. They by law have to make a profit for those shareholders. Do they have to care about what happens to anybody who lives around the factories they own? No, they've just got to make a profit. This is where the economy in our present day world has to change. We have to bring a kind of socialism into corporate businesses, you know what I mean, corporations. We need to actually change that piece of the law that says that the only thing they care about, and by law they've got to care about, is making a profit. That needs to be redacted. It needs to be taken out, and they actually need to care about how they make a thing, what the consequences of them making a thing in a certain area are, and whether they, you know, spoil, you know, the environment, whether they have a detrimental effect on the economy of other nations or their own nation, whether they have a detrimental effect upon the balance of you know, the finances and, you know, rich versus poor within their own country. I mean, why shouldn't a corporation, if it makes £20 billion or $20 billion profit in a year, why shouldn't, if they see deprivation in the areas surrounding their factories and their headquarters, why shouldn't they be told, well, you've got to pay 2.5% of your profits towards the people who live in your area, who you, for the last 100 years, have been telling, you are our workforce, you're the people who make our company great, you know, so, you know, work for us and then you just dumped them as soon as you could make a factory overseas. You've dumped them and left them in poverty. You know, why shouldn't they pay 2% towards, you know, making the roads, you know, pothole free, making the school, you know, leak-free roofs. You know, why shouldn't they be encouraged to invest in, you know, making sure that, you know, the local area doesn't fall into deprivation? Why shouldn't they be held responsible for, you know, the infrastructure, you know, the damage to, you know, bridges and, you know, the roads that they drive their trucks over? I mean, they're obviously not paying enough, because if they were paying enough, those roads would have been repaired, those bridges would have been repaired. The people who live in that area would not be in poverty. I'm not just talking about Coca-Cola, I'm talking about every corporation in America, every corporation in Europe, every corporation around the world. Why aren't they charged 2% of the profit that the factories and corporations make, forced to pay that 2% towards the local communities around their factories, their distribution centres, you know, the roads that they use? I mean, why not? 2.5%, it's not a lot to ask. 2.5% from the profit. I mean, they've already recovered all the losses for the manufacture, the building of the factories, you know, all that, you know, it's just the profit that we take 2.5% from. Why not? Because even in the Bible, I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I do remember some of the stories of the Bible. I remember, I think it's the Bible, it may not be in the Bible, but I think I remember something about, you know, Joseph and his many coat of colours, and he had a dream of the 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows, you know what I mean? And like, why can't corporations understand that, you know, they should, when they're having fat times, remember that there's going to be lean times ahead, and in fact they might even be responsible for the lean times, and they should take some of the money they saved up and distribute it in the thin times in order to make sure that people don't starve to death. Because this is what the Egyptian king was told by Joseph, wasn't it? You know, in the 7 fat years, store the grain, store it up, and he made storing it in it, so in the lean years he had grain to give to people so they didn't starve. So why don't we see corporations, a lot of them ruled and run by supposedly, you know, Christians who believe in the Bible, so why don't they save some of their money from their fat years and then distribute it to the poor in their country to make sure that they don't starve and they're not below the poverty line and they're not needing to go out and rob and kill other people in order to survive? Because this is what happens. When you force a good person into a position that's untenable for him, seeing his own children cry overnight with empty bellies, he feels pushed to do something he might not feel within his soul, within his heart, within his mind that he should do, but he feels pushed to do whatever it takes to feed those starving, crying children. Not everyone who commits a crime is an evil, horrible person. Some of them are just pushed to breaking point where they don't see any other way out. Our society needs to understand the psychology of human beings. We know that this is the case. We know that pushed to the edge, everybody's got their breaking point. These corporations over the next 10 years or so, I think, and also the people that we elect to government, are going to realise that, you know, you can only fuck the system so much. You can only be a fucking idiot for your own benefit for so long. But eventually the people will be out in the street with pitchforks and torches looking for your head. That's what happens within society. It's what happens when even a small group of people, if the people that you choose to be your leader or allow to be your leader, don't deliver, eventually what happens is that the sacrifice that you sacrifice to your gods ends up being that leader. That's the way that human beings think. It's the way that we are genetically brought up. It's the way we are genetically designed. And I'm hoping people don't take that as I believe in intelligent design. Evolution designed us to be like that, strictly through the way that we evolved. Through the processes I've described to you, from the hunter-gatherer through the villages to the cities and towns and, you know, globalisation. We still think like the hunter-gatherer, you know. This is exactly why corporations upstaked and moved to fresh grounds. They didn't have expansion in the grounds that they were already established in. Coca-Cola couldn't expand itself more in America because it had reached saturation. The only option for it was to, like the hunter-gatherer, up stakes and move somewhere else. That's the only way it could see itself from becoming bigger and growing and expanding. There was no expansion left on its home ground. But it couldn't upstake and move everything, but it did upstake and move its production facility. And what was its production facility? Well, it's the same as the hunter-gatherer, you know. The production of the hunter-gatherer was gathering food, you know, bugs, grains, roots, plants, you know. And when they found that it was, you know, their local area was devolved of that, they had to move. And what is corporations sort of hunter-gatherer, you know, end game? It's profit. It's percentage of market share, and the only way to increase that was for them to up stakes and move overseas. So even they still have that mental understanding that when the ground begins to become barren, you move to fresh fields. They're even playing out the same game that we started off with as a budding race, you know what I mean? The hunter-gatherers of our past, they still think like those hunter-gatherers, but that's what drives us all. And we all see the same premise, you know what I mean? That when the ground becomes barren, you move somewhere else. You can only squeeze so much out of the area around about you, and then it's beholden upon you to move somewhere else, unless you move towards, as the first villages did, conservation. You conserve the area. You don't take too much. You don't look for ultimate profits. You look for enough to sustain you to the next week, the next month. Unfortunately, corporations don't see it like that. Corporations want every penny they can get and more. They're not happy making just $1 billion profit a year. They want to make 2, 3, 4, 5, you know. And if it takes totally destroying the land around about them to get that, they'll do it, because they know there's other grass, greener grass on the other side of the fence to move to, and then they can just forget about the barren wasteland they've left behind. What they haven't taken into consideration is eventually all the fucking new green grass on the other side of the fence is going to be denuded and barren as well. What they're going to do then? We only have one planet. Once we've fucked the whole planet up, then what do you do? This is the way that I see finance and economics at the moment. It's runaway free market. It's like, instead of having 35 people in the village, you've got 3 billion, and you've spread across the whole of the savannah, and basically once you've denuded the whole savannah, there's nowhere to move to. You know, there's nowhere to move to. Once you've eaten everything, killed everything, that's it. There's nothing left. And this is the kind of economics that we're facing today with these corporate entities. They've got no restrictions upon the amount of damage they will do to everything around about them, because they're basically by law told they've got to do it. And it's time for us to change that. We need to change the laws that corporations live by, so that they can at least look to the future and think, I can't just continually move from one green field to another until it's gone. I need to actually try and consider rotating the crop. You know, crop rotation is some farmers used to use. Now they don't care, they just slap lots of chemicals on it and force that ground to produce withered, crappy fucking corn that they charge a high price for. But you know, there's no rotation, there's no idea of having to let the ground recover before I go back and take my next gigantic amount of fucking cash out of it. Corporations got to be forced into understanding that they can't continue just move to greener pastures and rape the shit out of that, because eventually there will be no green pastures left. And let's face it, there's some places in the world that, if they ever do get to totally denuding and destroying, it will be the death of us anyway. If we cut down every tree in South America and every tree in Africa, kill all the wildlife, build farms and offices and skyscrapers across the whole fucking world, it's the death of mankind. We're murdering ourselves, because there's no coming back from that. There's absolutely no coming back from that. Even if we develop the best forms of futuristic energy, even if we develop ways of growing beef in a fucking vat, if the seas turn to acid and there's no trees to put moisture into the earth to give us rain, the earth will die. We won't need a second coming. Jesus wouldn't even come and set a foot on a shit planet like that. It's the end of the world as we know it. I won't talk much about cash because it's not about cash. The economy of the world is not about cash, it's not about gold, it's not about being rich. Not in that sense of having money to buy things. Because the closer you get to there being nothing available to sustain life on the planet, the closer we get to money being worthless. You can't eat gold, you can't eat the dollar. There are some things in this planet that are worth more than money. The ecosystem is one of them. And the more we destroy of it, the less your dollar is going to be worth, until eventually your dollar is worthless. You may end your life with $1 trillion in the bank, but for all of that, it will be worth nothing. Not to you, not to your offspring, not to your descendants, because you won't have any descendants. You will have murdered them simply through the accumulation of wealth. It's going to take a lot more people in the world to start to think like me, but I think there are more and more people begin to become more rational and understanding and look at the world more through the eyes of it's an integrated system and not something I can just use and abuse and make a profit from. I don't know how long it will take for most of the world to get to that understanding, but we are through information, through the availability of information and knowledge and truth and facts, through the internet, but not just through that, but through just conversing with other people. We are beginning to understand that it's retarded for our government to put in place one law that says a corporation can't do this, and then put another law in place to say that even if they do that, it's secret and you can't know about it and you can't take them to court over it. So that's all very well to say corporations can't poison your child, but it's another thing to put a law in saying that even if they do poison your child, we're going to lock the information up that proves that away from you and say it's private financial information that you shouldn't see in case it damages the corporation that makes money out of that process. That's just madness. But this is what's going on. Our governments are hiding the facts from us that these corporations are using processes that are poisoning us slowly. Maybe not so slowly in some cases. And what kind of government is that? It's supposed to be run for the people, it's run for the corporations. That's why I say in the next 10 years. I really do believe it will be over the next 10 years. Corporations will be reined in and kicked in the ass. And some of them will be strung up. I'm ashamed to see that America and my country, the fucking United Kingdom, didn't take more of the bankers to task for the fucktardedness, and didn't put some of the politicians who fucking wrote those rules out in the fucking ear and says you can never hold public office again for the fucking shit-tarded fucking crap you pulled. Because a lot of the politicians enabled the corporations. Okay, the corporations sort of bought them off, but they could always have said no. Isn't that the whole point of being a human being, that you can use your own brain, look at a fucking set of facts, look at something presented to you and say, I think that's a bad idea. Even though I'm going to become rich through it, I still think it's a bad idea for all the people around me that I'm supposed to be representing. That's the whole point of being elected into office, to represent the people. You think of the people. You think of what's good for the nation, not what's good for the rich bastard already sitting on a fucking hill of beans, you know what I mean? Anyway, I've rambled on. I've not really given any facts, figures or statistics. I'm just asking you to think over what I've explained, what I've expressed to you, and try and look at the world through that lens, right? And see if what I'm saying makes any sense to you. And don't worry whether well, if you agree with me and we should curtail corporations, don't worry about if it's going to affect you, your share price or whatever, because your share price is fucked anyway. In the next 10 years, I guarantee you're going to be fucking broke, and somebody else is going to have all your money, and it's going to be somebody who's already got more money they can spend in a lifetime, because that's the way our economy is structured at the moment. And what I'm saying is, we need to destructure our economy. We need to pick it apart and realise what's good and what's bad for nations, for the people within those nations, and for the wider aspect of the human race surviving on this planet past fucking 2100, you know what I mean? Because at the moment, the way we're going, if we don't do something in the next 10 years, we're fucked. But in the middle of the next century, we're going to have people flooded out. I mean, I'm not talking, just some people that you don't know. You're going to see the coastal of America rising by 2 or 3 meters. You're going to see, huge swathes of India. Absolutely unable to grow any crops. Starvation, rampant starvation. And India's a place that's got nuclear fucking warheads, man. What do you think that government's got to do if they ask the world for help and we say no because we've got our own problems? We're going to be fighting for land and water over the next fucking 50, 60 years. At the end of this century, 2100, I'd be surprised if we haven't had several world wars. In the last 50 years of this century, I reckon there will be several world wars. And there might even be wars within the borders of the United States of America, as people who are flooded out try to flood into the interior where they have land to settle on, which is already owned by all the corporations who don't want people there because they're growing corn to make fucking oil out of it. How are they going to feel about you moving in there and pitching a fucking tent? Yeah. This is what I'm saying, We know the way the world's going. Just look at it. Just look at it. And all this stuff that you think is not happening, global warming, flooding coming in the next 50 years, all you Christians as well, you think, well, what if you're wrong? What if God does it? Well, just imagine if I'm right and you're wrong. Jesus isn't going to come and suck you up into heaven. What I'm saying is, you and your kids are going to be suffering through floods, famine, disease, and you're going to have a few small 1%, 2% of the world are going to be sitting in gigantic skyscrapers above everything, sending the army to push you off the wee bit of land you've found to pitch your tent on because, well, they own it. Because they bought it off your government when you weren't looking. That's all I'm saying, Think about it. It's not you fucking bad, motherfuckers.